Hello everyone, this is LockOS, and welcome back to the Mirage 1000C. In this video tutorial, we're going to be covering the autopilot systems for the Mirage 1000C that have to deal with flight. There is a automated landing system for the Mirage 1000C that basically uses the autopilot system to land. However, I want to save that as a series on tutorials for automated landing for a more advanced landing tutorial series. That being said, we still have 3 autopilot systems to cover today, so we're going to get to it. All the autopilot systems are located to the left and sort of the upper side here of this left console right here. So right beneath this little wall that juts out, we have the autopilot master button, and this is going to enable both the attitude hold as well as allow you to then access the other 2 modes of the autopilot systems. The other 2 modes are altitude hold, which will hold the altitude that you are currently flying at, but if you want to select a predetermined altitude to hold the aircraft at, so for instance, if you put the aircraft in a climb and you want to level out at a certain altitude, you then want to use selected altitude hold button, and to select the altitude that you want to hold at, you go down here to these rotary wheels. We want to hold at 17,000 feet, so 1 here for the 10,000 foot selector, and then 7 here for the 1,000 foot selector. So that is 17,000 feet that we're going to level out at. And keep in mind, if you are, as part of your starter procedure, if you know you're going to be tasked to fly at a certain altitude, or if you're part of a multiplayer server and your flight agrees you want to fly out at a certain altitude, go ahead and just dial this in while your INS system is aligning. It's a simple, easy thing. That way, when you take off and start flying, you can immediately just bang on the buttons, and you won't have to worry about setting this in the cockpit. This keeps it nice and simple for your climb out procedure while you're trying to focus on making sure you're not running into anybody who's doing any weird things on an online server. Go ahead and we're going to set our radar out, return our radar altimeter on just because we can. And we're going to then disengage our parking brake and go to mil power and take off. We're going to go at mil power today just because we don't want to do anything. We don't need the extra burner. We don't need the burner cans to take off today. Now, the cool thing is that you can use the autopilot system, even though there's an altitude hold and a attitude hold. You can use it to set up banks. So that is a very nice feature of the Mirage 1000C. It's not just a level flight system. It is actually the ability to do there's the ability to have a bank set up as well. However, if you want to fly nice, straight, and level, you can also do that very easily. So here we are. We don't want to fly. We don't want to climb too aggressively because we want to showcase a nice climb with the altitude select hold. So we're going to level out here at a fairly low 1500 or so. And the first thing we want to do is set up autopilot master mode button down here. And this, as you can see, has set our autopilot system to hold this attitude in flight. So we are flying with just like 1 degree above the horizon. So we are going to slowly start gaining altitude that way. We can also use this to set up a bank. So we can do a slow banking climb. Now, to do that, we need to first disconnect the autopilot, because if you don't disconnect the autopilot and you say violently throw your stick around, you can see that the aircraft's autopilot system goes from a solid green A to a P, basically indicating that the autopilot system is disengaged and it needs to be reset before you can do anything with it again. So to do that, you want to go to we're going to go to our controls here to showcase this. It's on your stick, so you're going to have to. It's on the stick in the jet, so you're going to have to bind it to make this work really at all. So you want to. I use autopilot disconnect / exceed ecstatic limit. By default, it's left shift and A. However, I bound it to one of my buttons on my HOTAS, so there you go. That is the autopilot disconnect pressed, and as you could see, when I pressed it, the yellow P caution light cleared, and we're all good to go. So let's go ahead and put this aircraft in a 5-degree climb and bank. There you go. The star, again, if you didn't notice before, a star appeared in the center of our flight path marker here on the HUD. This showcases that we are indeed in a climb. So we are in a, not that we are in a climb, but it showcases that we are, the autopilot system is engaged and is trying to hold the aircraft at this attitude and bank and the like. So it is at a 5 degrees climb and this gentle left-hand bank. See Dubai down there with the Palm Islands right there, and the World Islands to our, I believe that would be 11. Yeah, 11 o'clock. So here we go. Now, if we want to level out our flight, and we want to fly at whatever altitude we are currently flying at, we first have to have the autopilot master mode selected button enabled. And then we go to altitude hold button, we click that. And as you can see, because we were in a climb, the aircraft has to dip down to get at the altitude that when we push the button. So whenever you press the button, the aircraft will fly at that altitude. Not at the, it's not going to level out and then fly at whatever altitude that becomes. It's going to fly at whatever altitude that whenever you press that button. So be careful if you are in a steep climb or a steep dive. Your aircraft's going to start pitching up and down to get back to whatever altitude it's whatever the altitude you pressed the button at was. I was lucky and I just hit 7,000 on the bang on the money. So that's that. And again, these altitude pilot hold buttons can be engaged in a bank. So you can actually do a fairly easy orbit. Oh, that's why that light was engaged. Also, because I don't normally fly with the audio warnings enabled. Bingo. For whatever reason, if you do a hot start in the Mirage, whenever you start up the Mirage from a ground start, it sets the bingo to like this ridiculously high number. Regardless, we are now flying in a nice easy bank. You can also fly nice and level if you have the Mirage in a level flight earlier. So there we go. We're just going to pull a little bit harder, just so that we're not flying too far from our home base. Pull our aircraft right there. There we go, that's good. Flying in between the two Palm Islands. And if we put the, there we go, we are flying now more or less nice and level. Autopilot master button enabled. Altitude hold button enabled. And we are now flying nice and level. Now, if you want to do the altitude selected hold button, you're first going to have to set up the aircraft in a climb. So we're going to go ahead, disable altitude, disable the autopilot with the disconnect. We're going to then put ourselves in a climb. Now, this is very much an autopilot system, not an auto throttle system. So make sure your throttles are set to at least 90%, and I would recommend, honestly, for an automatic climb, setting your throttles to just 100% mill power. So that way your Mirage 1000C is going to have enough thrust and power to do the climb without having to worry about losing speed and stalling. We're going to go ahead and put the Mirage 1000C into a climb. It doesn't matter what rate of climb you decide, as long as you are climbing. Obviously, the higher you pitch up, the faster you will climb and get the altitude. Enable autopilot. Enable selected altitude hold button. It'll go into a prep mode quickly, and then it will go to the selected altitude hold button mode right here. So with this light enabled and this light enabled, the aircraft is now going to hold this climb until it gets close to 17,000, which it is. Once it gets close to 17,000, which is our selected altitude, it's going to start pulling the aircraft down so that we will gradually and nice and easily get to 17,000 feet, which is our selected altitude. Obviously, if you select a different altitude, it will do the same profile. It will get close to whatever your altitude that you selected is. And then once it gets close, it'll start pitching down the aircraft automatically, and then it'll level out in flight, and then it'll hold the altitude at 17,000 feet once it gets there. Or it'll hold the altitude to whatever you select at once it gets there. And of course, once the aircraft starts leveling out, you don't need to necessarily be at 100% throttle. Only put the aircraft at like 90, 95, 100% throttle during the climbing portion of the autopilot. If you do want to keep it mil power, go for it. However, like I've mentioned before in previous Mirage videos, the Mirage 1000C is has a very powerful engine and is relatively lightweight, so you will be going quite fast if you keep the engine at 100% throttle and level flight. You might want that, you might not want that, depends on how you want to run your fuel economy on that flight that day, and or if you need to catch up with AI aircraft or friendly aircraft. So there we go. We are now leveled out at 17,000 feet, which is our selected altitude. The last 10 feet with this altitude hold button mode tends to be a fairly slow climb into that last 10 feet, so do keep in mind if you're plus or minus, if you're like minus 10, 20 feet, it's going to be a relatively slow climb to whatever your selected altitude hold is. But regardless, we are at 17,000 on the money. We are now in level flight, and that's it for the autopilot tutorials. So, relatively simple, but still very useful for the Mirage 1000C. Good thing is that, again, this autopilot system is very nice. It allows you on longer flights to, especially during the climbing portion, allows you to get down here into the cockpit, set things up, make sure your TACAN's set up, make sure all your countermeasure systems are set up, especially going through your decoy release program, making sure you have the right program selected, jamming mode, all that other fun stuff, getting all that stuff all set up and ready for combat. So, with that being said, this is LockOS, signing out from DCS World and the Mirage 1000C, and I will see you all in the next video.